Combustion Physics in Lund. Okay, so I think we have not enough time to go to all the audience today. Maybe we should start with our main activity. Let us start to share screen. Okay, I hope all of you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon from Sweden to all of you, all my colleagues and friends in over the world. There's some colleagues from US will drop later because the time now is quite early in US. So we are really happy to welcome all of you to the inspirational seminar presented by Professor Marcus Alden. Before starting, I would like to thank Marcus for kindly accepting my invitation. Let me start with a little bit about our speaker and his affiliation. Let's see. Okay, so Marcus is working at Lund University, and this is one of the most famous, one of the best 100, yeah, I think university all over the world. It contains 9 faculties, and Marcus is working at Combustion Physics. This is one of division at the Department of Physics, and the Department of Physics is belong to the Faculty of Engineering in Lund University. And you know, the Division of Combustion Physics is one of the strongest combustion center in the world. It was established in 1991 by Professor Marcus Alden. And our speaker today was elected as among the 7 most successful scientists in Sweden in natural science and technology. He involves in establishing not only Division of Combustion Physics, but also many other combustion centers. So he played a very important role in strengthening the position of combustion activity in Sweden and also in the world. During his career, Marcus achieved a lot of famous grants and awards, including ERC Advanced Grants 2 times, some other grants, for example, Valence 2 times, and many others. Actually, the reason why I invited Marcus today because he is not only excellent scientist, but he also very interesting and outstanding leader. He played very important role in mentoring, inspiring, and supporting many generations at our division on the path to success. So after Marcus, there are many colleges achieve famous grants, for example, ERC and many other grants from European and in Sweden. So by that, I give the word to Marcus. So this is just some photo when Marcus was younger. And maybe Marcus will talk a little bit about his hobby later. Thank you, Marcus.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's see if I manage to share my screen. So what do you see right now? You see a garden?
Yes, your garden. Beautiful.
Okay. Then I try to. And now you see something like how to succeed in science?
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. And thanks for the invitation. Actually, when I was asked first, I got the message that it was something like how to succeed in science, but I thought that was a little bit pretentious. So I changed the name and made it a little more general. So it's more of science and life. And you said, Kwong, that you were a little bit nervous, and I must say that I'm also a little bit nervous because it's the first time I give a talk like this. First of all, to a group that I'm not really familiar with. I don't know the expectations. I thought maybe that there would be more PhD students, postdoc, but now it seems to be a lot of professors. So maybe what I'm saying is not regarded as very actual, but we'll see. We'll see. So I plan to give 2 lectures. The first will be a more general lecture, which I will start with a disclaimer. I will come back to that. Then I will give a little bit of personal background. Kwang has already mentioned a little bit about the scientific activities, how I have seen on collaborations, challenges and potential solutions, and also a little bit on reflections about writing proposals, how they are or could be evaluated, and some maybe advice for mainly for PhDs and postdoc, but maybe others could at least listen to this. And then after that, I thought to just give a more conventional scientific lecture on laser diagnostics. But for the disclaimer, what do I mean with that? Well, the first hours, as you can see, it's pretty personal, where I will give some advice in non-scientific matters concerning collaboration and writing proposal. And I just want to say that I'm by far not an expert. I have not gone through courses how to do this. So what I will say is based on experience, my experience at this location. And of course, that might not apply to other places with different culture, different social and maybe political environment. So bear that in mind. This is sort of my story. But I would encourage you, all of you, to that we could have a discussion and comments and questions afterwards, because I would be interested to see what I say might not work at all in other environments. But going back to the personal background, here you can see a picture of Sweden. I was born in the countryside outside Vårgårda. My father had a shop in the countryside selling all kinds of things, including food and other for the farmers. So that was how I grew up. Later on, I went to high school in Alingsås, it's here, and then later to Chalmers University of Technology in Göteborg, where I studied engineering physics. And roughly half time into my PhD, my supervisor, Professor Sune Svanberg, got a position in Lund. So I just had to move down to Lund. And the plan was that after I finished my PhD, I should return to west side of Sweden, Göteborg. Now that's 42 years ago. So I guess I will be here in Lund at least many years to come, hopefully. Kwang already mentioned a little bit about the CV. I don't have to go through this. I just want to mention that I have been, as you can see, maybe here, that I've been involved quite heavily in China. So together with Shushan Li, I think we've been every year for the last 15 years or something like that, going to China and visiting different universities, especially Xi'an University. And then what I'm going to talk about mainly is the experience from making proposals and trying to get that working. And you can see our centers of excellence and centers of competence. in the early 90s, the Swedish government decided to put a lot of money into research funds, and that sort of created a lot of initiatives, and also from us here in Lund. So we tried to run for centers, and we actually managed to get 2 centers, one center of competence in combustion, which is now more directed towards combustion engines, and one center of excellence in combustion science and technology, CECOS, which I will briefly come back to a little bit later. And then about the ERC and Wallenberg proposal that Kwong mentioned. Then also I have sort of collected hopefully some experience from being involved in various evaluation and advisory board from the Research Council. And maybe I should mention a little bit about the Wallenberg. Wallenberg is a private, not company, but giving money to science. It's the largest in Sweden. I think it's the second largest in the world, giving a lot of money in various areas. And I've been involved in the advisory board, giving projects in physics, engineering, astronomy, and mathematics. They also have a board in natural science and one in medicine. And then they also are financing what is called Wallenberg Academy Fellows. And there I was in the board for engineering for a couple of years. And then some tasks outside internationally. So just to give a flavor of my background or our background, we are working on combustion. And then, of course, you can ask, why do we spend money and resources to study combustion processes? And of course, it's important because combustion still stands for more than 80% worldwide of our energy utilization. But it's not without any problem. It produces a lot of pollutions, for example, NOx, SOx, particles. And nowadays, the main emphasis is on carbon dioxide. But it's also important for the industry. So we have done a lot of work on together with industry to increase the competitiveness, to get, for example, Volvo cars, Volvo trucks with lower emission and increased efficiency. And then, of course, we have outstanding academic challenges, and it's strongly multidisciplinary. This is just photos that I borrowed from Ed Law, showing a candle at normal gravity and how it looks in more or less zero gravity, just as an example. Just to further emphasize the importance of working together. Here you have in combustion interaction of turbulence, which is a research area in itself that could be very complicated. On top of that, we have chemical reactions. And as you can see here, if you take the simplest fuel, hydrocarbon fuel that you can have, methane, you have a lot of elementary reactions. So that means that we have to deal with not only the chemistry, but also the CFD. So then if I just turn a little bit onto the laser diagnostics and how I have seen, that's sort of my field, the modus operandus of that. I used to see that divided into different levels. In the base here, the ground level, we have more generic activities. It's dealing with light matter interaction on a more fundamental level, also developing new techniques. For example, here we can try to understand how would a nonlinear spectra like from cars look like at 30 bar and 3000 Kelvin, just because that's important to use when we go into application. The next level is to take the more advanced, mature techniques to study together with other experts in combustion and study combustion phenomena, for example, pollutant formation, different aspects of fuel properties, turbulent reacting flows, high pressure phenomena. That takes place in the laboratory with equipment that are handleable, if you understand what I mean. But the next step is also to go to real device. And when I say real, I mean really mean real advice. It could be big engines, like this is from a ship engine, gas turbine, furnaces. So that's how I have seen the different activities in laser diagnostics. And when I graduated many years ago now, I was sort of born in this level, in the generic activities. I grew up with colleagues that study fine structure of atoms, hyperfine structure, no combustion whatsoever. So how could I make an impact in the field of combustion? That was the question I asked myself, and then I thought, well, it's just to team up with colleagues from other areas. And then we had the challenge and first sort of problem. This is how I, coming from physics, realized the development gap with the more engineering departments. So although we were aiming at the same sort of solutions to get combustion better, we didn't speak the same language. And we, for example, in the physics, my colleague published in Phys Rev, Science, Nature. That was not the case with my sort of hopefully colleagues in mechanical, chemical engineering. So how do we solve this gap? How do we create connections between different disciplines? And here I want to be a little bit personal. I said to Kwong that I will be personal when I describe this. And when I look back on my dreams as a teenager, it was not at all in science. And Kwong showed some figures, but I mean, I failed desperately in terms of my dreams. My dreams were to work or to be in soccer. So I spent quite a lot of time working acting in soccer, and here are just some clips from my career when I was much younger. So then you could ask, why do I bring this up? What has soccer to do with science? And moreover, what did I learn from soccer? As I said, I spent quite some time, and you know that soccer is a team, right? You work in a team, and we win as a team, we lose as a team, and also that all members in the team are equally important. And how do you define the team? It's not the players that make the goals and are on the pitch. It's also the coach. It's all the administrative staff, the economic staff, the staff that cleans our shirts or cut the grass. That's our team. So then, of course, is science a sport? Well, we can argue whether science is a sport. And if it's a sport, is it an individual sport or is it a team sport? My view, and here I would certainly like to hear your opinion, science could be a team effort. We could definitely become stronger and achieve more if we work together coherently. If this happened with certain boundary conditions and if we think how we collaborate. So the modus operandi could be something like this. that together everyone achieves more. And if we just go back with this challenge, how could we, taking into account maybe the team spirit, how we go further? Well, in the 80s, we created Lund University Combustion Center, where we had participants from physics, from fire and safety engineering, chemical engineering, and engineering sciences. And when we created this, we didn't have any money, we didn't have any support, we just met. I don't remember whether it was maybe once a semester, twice a semester, but we met, we discussed, and the aim was to, in some way, combine the different areas of science, how you define basic engineering and applied science, but roughly the physics, chemistry, mechanics in basic science, and the areas in engineering science and in applied science, to make that into a package that could respond to the interest from the industry. And this is just a picture of the board in the late 80s. And here are our people from our colleagues and from industry. And by that, we could create, I would say, a bridge between the different disciplines, so that we could work together and achieve more. But it's also in our field kind of collaboration matrix. I remember that we have the different levels, light matter interaction, phenomena, and apparatus, and then we as a diagnostic activity. But then, of course, we had the collaborating partners, and it's important to see that the people working mostly maybe in one area do not work by themselves. It could very well be that a technique is developed here. Its work could be developed and work together with people more directed towards developing and study combustion phenomena, and then with the modeling people, and the same way in industry. So it's very important to see that what I'm trying to describe is not that people work by themselves. It's interacting within the division, but also with the various partners. And just to show how that could, in our area, function. For example, we have development of advanced two-dimensional laser-induced fluorescence. We work to try to develop, for example, how to visualize flame fronts, CH, HCO, and so on. And that could be done by using an Alexandrite laser. I will discuss that more in the next lecture. And that was purely development of how this can be used to get more signals. And here we can see a single shot image. And that could be published then in a more optical oriented journal. And in the next step, that was worked together with people knowing the CFD. So then we just took that technique, applied it in specific flames and burners to provide images that could not be published in easily, at least in optical journals. But now the aim is to publish this in combustion journals. And here are simultaneous measurements of formaldehyde and OH with two colors at different flame speeds. So here you can see a laminar flame going to very turbulent. For us as a physicist, at least for myself, it does not necessarily mean too much, but for the CFD modelers, that's exactly what they wanted to have. And finally, this was transported physically to Finspång in Siemens to measure in one of their gas turbines. So here you can see the link from the development of a technique, which is more or less pure physics, working together with modelers, and then working with industry. And that also gives a possibility that whatever is developed, it does not only give, if you're speaking about publication and citation, the technique that is developed can be used in different approaches, so that whoever are on this publication get more benefit that can be used later on in their career. I will mention a little bit about this center that we got in the mid-90s. And that was based on essentially the same approach that we worked on a generic level, worked on a phenomenological level, as well as with the industry. And here we were competing with a lot of other centers in Sweden and managed to get this center through. And of course, it has to be, since the industry is co-financing this, it has to be shown that they benefit from this. So whatever we do in the more fundamental activities, we are, I wouldn't say forced, but almost forced to apply this also in the apparatus. Not all of the techniques that are developed can be used, but at least we should have an honesty that if we suggest a technique to be developed that can be sponsored from indirectly or directly from Volvo or Siemens, at least we should try to apply it in one of their devices. And then, I mean, we can fail, but at least we got the publication in the optical journals and maybe also in combustion journals. And sometimes, not that seldom, I mean, the technique developed can be used more applied in different apparatus. I would also mention a special challenge when we got this center, the CCOST, the financer, the SSF Foundation for Strategic Research, we sent in a proposal. We thought that the Lund University should get all these funds. They came back and said that you'll get this fund, but you have to collaborate with Chalmers and the Royal Institute of Technology. This is at Göteborg and this is at Stockholm. And at that time, we weren't extremely happy because that of course created a potential competition between the different universities. And we tried to solve that by putting together a board where no one from the participating divisions participated. We put together a board with external and I would say neutral partners, which had the confidence from all the different parties. And then we had a scientific expert group where we had people from the different participating divisions. And here we could have a very hard discussions, but we didn't take any decisions in this expert group. Whatever was said was directed to the board, and they took the board took the decision. That means that we could work together and there were no sort of conflict of interest because the board was realized by all partners to be sort of as neutral as possible. So with that, how and what kind of advice for a well-functioning and strong collaboration, if we look at the scientific aspects. And once again, I mean, these are from my experience that the whole is more than the sum of the different parts. We can have added value if we complement and connect different scientific activities. And my advice, right or wrong, has been that we, working with diagnostics, should try to be just expert in the diagnostics, rather than trying to be a bad expert in CFD or in kinetics. It's better, I think, to collaborate with the real experts. If we are experts in diagnostics, and then we create the connection in a bad way with other experts, then we hopefully, and as they've seen, can compete with places like Stanford or Cambridge or whatever, where most of the I would say activities are within one division. Doing this, my experience is also that we should try as much as possible to avoid internal competition. I've seen that's not good for the general spirit. So now, if I go back to this, you see a lot of science, basic science, engineering science, applied science. I define that to get this to work, it's more of social science. And I put science in quotation mark because it's not, of course, science. But it's how to get this working so that each member benefits from that. That has been the challenge. And there I have sort of advice or experience concerning the social aspects. I think that when we created the combustion center many years ago, I don't think we thought of that, but I mean, we created a meeting place. We created a place where people met. We could have a joint coffee, regular meetings, seminars, after work activities. And by that, we got sort of friends. The professor in gas turbines, which we before could have had different opinions on, now became a friend. So for a collaboration to work, I think it's very important to show mutual respect, trust, and confidence. For example, if I refer to the collaboration that we created with the mechanical engineering many years ago, I could at any place, at any time, have my colleague from mechanical engineering go to Stockholm and negotiate on behalf of us, or vice versa. And I think that in order for a collaboration to work, this is very important. Furthermore, when you have a collaboration and work with colleagues, it's important to listen to what your colleagues say, and maybe what they don't say, and what is said between the lines. So to be sensitive to the well-being and input from others, I think is important. And it's also, I mean, I'm not saying that after all these years that we have agreed on everything, but I mean, sometimes you have to take one step back in order to take two steps forward, and not see it as a loss of prestige. And related to this, it's not always sufficient to be right. I'm telling my colleagues and friends and students that you are right, that maybe a court would say that you're right. That's not always sufficient. And I used to compare that with if you go across a street on a pedestrian pass, I mean, where you have the right to pass, and don't look for the cars. I mean, you can say that you have right when you are at hospital. So even if you are right, it's not sufficient. Now, I think that that's at least, I think that that has been important. What is more, in my opinion, important, well, I think it's important to make sure that the gain and success and credits are equally distributed among the partners collaborating. And related to that, the result from negotiations should, in a longer perspective, be equal. Of course, I mean, we have had a lot of negotiations, and I'm not saying that we are sort of having a different opinion, do not have different opinions. And you can go into negotiations, but you should watch up a little bit so that you don't win all the discussions. It's like when you negotiate with your wife. I mean, you can't win every time. In order for a collaboration to work, I think it's important to have that kind of equal. And then, generally speaking, to enjoy when colleagues have success. And generally speaking, if you are generous, I mean, then you will get back that. So be careful of that. Now I've discussed and mentioned a lot about working with collaboration, but I think it's also important to make sure that individuals are seen and recognized and benefit from the collaboration. I don't think it's a, if you compare to the team spirit, I mean, you can play in a team and you can win in the team, but you can still have members being selected for the national team, right? So, I mean, you can work together and still be seen, because individuals, I mean, the individuals are trying to get these grants, and they can't just say that they have been part of a big group, which is not sort of very visible. So I think that the individuals should be seen and recognized still within this collaboration. So what has been the driving forces for collaboration? If I try to summarize, it strengthened the competitive advantage in large external proposal, and I'm referring to the Wallenberg proposal, the ERC proposal, the Center of Competence. If we create a team spirit, we could get larger motivation. We hopefully increase the well-being, and if we are happy on our job, we certainly achieve better. So if we are good in compromising and collaborating, and if we can subordinate the strategy and hopefully follow it, then we can use it to our advantage. And that's how I have seen our activity. If we want to compete with the best universities worldwide, and if we find that the collaboration is sort of giving benefits for all of us, why don't we do it? But we have to think of this sort of boundary condition in our collaboration. So then I had some other slides, and I don't know how that fits in. I thought there would maybe be more PhD students and postdoc, but I could still anyway go through this and say what you think. How do we write a good proposal? Well, of course, there are nothing that is correct in this. When I write a proposal, I try to find an overall message with the proposal. It doesn't take long time to write the proposal, but it could take long time, at least for me, to find out what really do I want to sell with this proposal. And if you can summarize sort of the main selling argument in a simple picture, and I really mean a simple picture, that's how I have tried to sell this. In many of the boards I've been involved in, there are sort of I would say that I'm a non-expert in many of the proposals that I have been given for evaluating. So, for example, in some of these boards, if we get, let's say, 30 proposals, then our task is to find out which of them should go to international evaluation. So that means that we in this group, which are I would say non-experts, during my 10, 15 or whatever years I've been in this, there might have been 1 or 2 proposals that I really felt this is my field. So they have to write the proposal in such a way that the non-experts like me or my colleagues understand what this is all about and decide that this is the proposal that should go further for international review. On the other hand, you have to write the proposal in such a way that the real expert find it good. So it's sort of both the non-experts and the expert should find this attractive. That holds for the board that I've been involved in. That might be different and in different countries. And I think that it's good to try to add space in the text and describing figures. Just imagine that when we get these 30, 40 proposals, if you start to read these and it's sort of filled with a text, single-spaced, you get a little bit not bored, but you get a little bit how to go through this, and you don't want the reviewers to get bored. So I think that it's good to try to add space and text and don't forget the figures. And then in these proposals, do not exaggerate. The ones that goes further to the external reviewers, and when I say external reviewers, that could include Nobel Prize winners. It's the best worldwide. So if you say that something is world leading, excellent, then it really has to be world leading. Further, and it's also important to be honest. In our group that we have had when we evaluate, you can apply for different grants, the research, science research board, strategic foundation, and so on. Don't try to hide if you have another similar proposal, because I've seen many times that one in the group said that I've seen the same very similar proposal in that board, which is not mentioned in the other one, and then of course it's a disaster. I have taken. It has been great to be part of these panels. I mean, you get a lot of experience. So if one is asked, it's good to accept this. And for the younger ones to apply also for minor grants, not only the big ones, because that shows that you're active. If you go, for example, for the Wallenberg Academy Fellows and show a long list of grants, that's good, even if it's not sort of the most prestigious one. And can ask an experienced colleague mentor for input to critical views. When we have this proposals, as I said, I mean, we in the board select mainly half, or what, 2/3, well, half, to go for international review. Then the half of the ones that come back are called for an interview. And that is important when we are to evaluate, for example, in the Wallenberg Academy Fellows, the future research leader. I've been in several occasions where we have had very good grades from the experts, but then after the interview, we have collectively said that this is certainly not a future leader, because the interview went very bad, and on the opposite also. So here it's important to be open, clear, enthusiastic, honest, and you could see that the one that practice several times and know this has an advantage. And also it's important to prepare for non-scientific questions. For example, in this Wallenberg board, we could have questions on what is your idea to increase or making the gender more equal? What's your views on patent? What's your views on teaching? How would you improve the scientific honesty and avoid scientific frauds? We ask about strength, and that might not be difficult for the candidate to tell their strength, but the next question is, what's your weakness? And that's also important to sort of know what you're strong at and what you might not be strong at. And then I'm sorry to say that it's the citation, the impact is important, especially when I can just say to myself, for myself, if I'm going to evaluate a proposal totally outside my area in whatever, robotics or something, you look at the citation, you look at the H index, and then how could you increase that? Well, for us in the laser diagnostic area, I've said to some of my colleagues, try to develop techniques, but then also to use it in the CFD, in the kinetics, in engines or in fires, so that if you develop a very advanced technique, you do not sort of only publish that, but also see whether that could be useful in nearby areas together with the colleagues I just described. So, yeah, how do you manage an academic career? These are some slides that I presented for PhDs, and I don't know how relevant this is. So for a PhD, I would say that try to choose whatever is right, scientific environment, good supervisor, and to go for what is of interest, not necessarily what might be the most strategic correct at that time. And then, of course, it's important to work hard. If you work hard, it's lead to better self-confidence, and in some way that leads to good luck. And it's always good to have good luck. It's important to be innovative within the project you're working. And especially when I've been in China, I've tried to tell the students that they should challenge their supervisor in a friendly way. You should not only always do what you are told. I mean, you could say, if you have ideas that something could be done in another way, have you thought of that? I think that's what we expect the students to think by themselves and not just follow exactly what the supervisors say. Postdoc, I think it's important to go for an international postdoc period. In some of these boards, it's almost mandatory, not necessarily, but it's an advantage. It might be important to at least slightly change field. Don't be afraid of new challenges, and take advantage of new possibilities, networks, maybe dynamic effects. And be pragmatic. What do I mean with this? Well, I think it's important whenever it's necessary to take fights, but choose your fights, only take when it's really needed. You don't want to have ones that shout for wolves, as we say in Sweden, too often. And one thing that I think is important, which I have tried to follow, is try to be honest about yourself and also about others. I mean, try to identify what is your pros and what is your cons, and use your pros and work on your cons. I think it's good with a good self-confidence, but I mean it should be as honest as possible. I think that was all in this first lecture, and I would strongly welcome question, comments, and if someone thinks that I'm totally wrong, I would appreciate that. And as I said before, these are just points coming from experience and might hold here in Lund for me, but not necessarily for others in other environments. But I mean, that's what you asked for, Kwong, my personal view, and that's what you got.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It's really nice and wonderful. I see a lot of good advice. Actually, I have a many chance to interact with Marcus. Whenever I need advice, I come to him and also Eric, and they always, and also my former supervisor, Thomas. So they give me a lot of advice. So I have a lot of chance to communicate with them, but many of you don't have a chance. So I think this is a great opportunity for you to interact with the speaker today. And this is a very open and friendly environment for all of us. So please give any question or discussion. Yeah. Any of you have a question?
I would like someone to say that I'm wrong, or I mean, hear experience from other places, because I see the difference. I mean, when we are in China, how different we are, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I mean, it's just that we have been brought up with different environments and different systems, different culture, and that of course influences how we think.
Please, Div.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
I have a
much,
question.
Marcus.
Oh.
Okay. I start first with my very simple question. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear from you different experience in writing the papers or project or supervise some student. My first question will be, you know that we are not on how I say the one who speak English. So do you think that English will be some kind of drawback for us to write a paper or a project, or some kind of difficulty for foreigner students who don't speak English to work in this international place where we need to communicate in English? So we need to work 2-3 times harder than American people or British people. Can you comment about that?
Yeah, no, I think that I mean we are. I'm not at all sort of fluent in English, and of course, I mean that's an advantage with as compared to British and US, and I think that's the way it is, and we can't change that. But I have not seen in evaluating proposals that has been to any disadvantage. If it's not, I mean, when you get a proposal, it can't be in too bad shape, because then you get a little bit annoyed. So I would recommend that at least it's readable and without too much easy errors, because that makes you a little bit. I don't think I've got any proposals, but I've got papers to review, and when I sort of had difficulties to understand the first page because the English was too bad, then I just gave up. And that's something which all of us that do not have English as first language, I think we just have to do the best of this. So of course, I mean it's a slight disadvantage, and I understand that it's maybe easier for us in the West, maybe as compared to once again, when I compare to China, I mean it's so different language, and I guess you can sort of say that it's the same with Vietnamese, I would guess. So that's maybe you have a bigger problem, but I don't see how we can sort of come around this. We just have to, all of us, try to work with the language, and I mean that was my greatest fear when I started to in science, to have to read English papers to communicate in English, because I'm not an expert in language.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I asked that question because in fact, yeah, we are Vietnamese origin, and when I came here to study, I don't speak English or even French. That is why for foreigner people like us to start to study and to work in the country where we don't speak their language, and we need to spend 3 times more than you know the people they speak their language. That is why even for the scientific paper or project, when we write a project with the language we don't know, so we spend more time to think, to write correctly, and sometimes even we have the same idea like the one from US, for example, but maybe we fail just because we don't know how to write that more clear than American people.
Yeah, and especially if you come to, I mean, Kwang, you come to Sweden and you want to make a future in Sweden, and then as I've told you, I mean, you should try to learn Swedish as well, and then you have both English and Swedish, and so that's of course a challenge.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Marcus. Yeah, I know that, Marcus. You remind me many times. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we continue with the second person, Tung Trần, I think, and then.
Hi, Professor Marcus Alden. Thank you very much for the excellent talk and also very inspiring.
Thanks.
I very much like the idea about the collaboration in the science, and also you compare with the soccer team, right? So in the science, also in the sport, sometimes we play the team, right? So the team wins, everyone win, right? And it's a team lose and everyone lose, but not everyone can understand that one. And when I do collaboration, I see two kind of people, and I want to ask you the question about how to deal with that people. The first one is the person is more senior and they do less, but really want more benefit or more credit to them. And second person is they sometimes very bitter in the way that they just want everything for them and don't care about other team player, right? They just, okay, all of the work is more benefit to them or more credit to them. How we can deal with that two people?
Well, I think, I mean, my experience is that collaboration only works if you create this sort of trust, confidence between each other, and maybe, I mean, I speak from my experience, and since I've been sort of the PI for several of the projects I mentioned, it has been easier for me to sort of speak to my colleagues because I've been formally in charge of the project. I understand that if the PI is not that interested in collaboration and has the power, and then it might be more problematic. I don't think that there are any sort of general rule how to do this. At least that's not my experience. It's probably different at different occasions, different locations, different environments. But I think that when and if people understand that it's a gain for both parties, then they can realize that this could work. And I used to compare to once again the Swedish national team in soccer. We can beat Brazil, we can beat France occasionally, although our individual players are not in the same quality as the French team or Brazilian team. So I think that if you can have a strategy, if you can work together, and that's the way I've seen that I think we have had excellent collaborate students all over the year. But of course, I mean, if you compare to the lead universities in Stanford, Princeton, where the best of the best of the best of the best can go to the PhD. I mean, we don't have that in Sweden. Still, I'm very, very satisfied with the ones. But I mean, with our system, how could we compete with another system like in Tsinghua in China? I mean, where only once again, I think you have in France also a very elitistic sort of selection of people to the best universities. And how could we that do not have that kind of system, then you have to have a strategy for that. And there are probably many strategies, and I've just pointed out with my background how we have tried to sort of solve this. I don't know whether that answered the question. I think it's
yeah, I understand. Yeah, sometimes it very much depends on the case to case, right? So it's a bit hard to have general answer.
I think also you can't force people to collaborate.
Right.
For example, I mean, I remember when we set up our collaboration, we had like 4 or 5 years to sort of get to know each other. Where we didn't have any project, we just get to know each other. And then we got this large project. And then I know another university that tried to sort of mimic our approach to sort of mix the physicist and the mechanical engineer in a very short time. And that didn't work because they were forced more or less to collaborate without having gone through this period where you create this trust or confidence. So I have a lot of respect for mixing people from different background and force anyone to collaborate. I think that's why these meeting places where you meet, you discuss, not necessarily science, you just meet and become friends.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think that is a very good advice, and that is what I learned from Marcus. Actually, because our division, we have a very close relationship between college. So, as Marcus said, that he built like a soccer team, and the young people here after work they have a many activity together, and we are like friends. So we support each other. So and thanks for that we build up the collaboration.
That is very nice environment. But it is not everywhere can be like that, right?
Yes, maybe the director like Thomas can feel like that. But in our
Yeah,
level,
it depends on the head of the team or head of the lead department somehow to use a good environment. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Tung. Tung actually is the assistant professor in South Florida University in US.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas. But maybe we wait another people already raised hand. Yeah, please go ahead. You don't have your name, so I don't know your name. iPhone 2, please. Professor Man Hung Phang in US. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean to set my computer, but there's some reason that why I had to go to the iPhone. So thanks so much, Marcus, for very wonderful stories you're sharing today, and we learned a lot. It just kind of reminded me about our Vietnamese soccer team, you know, like we also have very wonderful soccer teams coached by you know, Korean Park Hang-seo's master, and we achieved a lot of you know, like breakthroughs during the recent year just because of the important role played by the coach. So my understanding is that like as a director, you know, as a coach, I think it's very important to build up a strong team. And since this Tuan also shares like experience about like personal issues, I think that like as a leader, I think it's important that you has a vision for the center, and also like it's important to select like the member for the center as well. So I mean, we understand that like is a member or like is, you know, team could have like the strength and weakness. So how you see the strength and weakness in each team, and how to come with a different approach to support them?
Well, I mean, I to be honest, I don't think that I have tried to on a group level work with pros and cons so much. I mean, it's more on an individual level. I spoke about these pros and cons. Of course, I mean, you shouldn't be too strategic, but I mean, if you see that you need a scientific new member, of course that should be done. But I think that we have looked quite a bit when we're trying to also recruit members that we think would fit into the overall system. I mean, you can't have sort of 10 Zlatan in your team, if you know Zlatan, because they are maybe not working as a team member. So I would say that when I've been involved in the recruitment, we have looked for the individual properties of that person, not only the citation or the number of papers. I mean, it's how would this person fit into this way of working that we have done. So we maybe Per-Erik, you have been around for quite some time. That's important to sort of keep the team spirit when we do the recruitment. But I wouldn't say that we select people from necessarily from the students to add new competence. I mean, that's more on a personal basis, that person is interested to be part of this kind of working together, working with different colleagues, different. I mean, we of course have supervisors, but I mean, students can I wouldn't say float, because that gives an impression that people are floating around. But I mean, we have people that work with one supervisor in one project, and then might maybe be in another project, and the supervisors know about this and support it. So if something is developed in the more fundamental area, then that person may be part of sort of another group who usually do the more applied work, just to be able to benefit from that development.
Yeah, I think that is exactly as I think that should happen, and I think that you has been very successful with that strategy. And so just my second question, and something that I thought would be quite interesting, because you mentioned that like the first dreams were like soccer, right? So you wanted to play soccer. So I'm sure that you play a lot during the childhood as well. So if you were given the second chance, so would you prefer to go play soccer, or you still want to become a scientist?
That's a very good question. Actually, I decided when I started at the university that I tried to look at myself. What strength, what weakness do I have? And I thought I would be able to take a position in one of the teams that I was discussing with in the first division. But for me, that was not sufficient. I thought I had sort of limitation that would not be giving me the possibility to sort of make a living out of soccer. So I stayed in my sort of home team and said that I will play in the lower divisions and instead finish the university. And I'm not the person that look back. I mean, I decide, and then by definition, that is correct, because I mean, you can't sort of make a decision and then wonder, did I do the right thing? I mean, I thought this over. I was tempted. I was tempted to sort of see whether how far I could go in soccer, but thought and realized that I was probably not good enough to be that good that would deserve not going to university. So yes, I would do the same today.
I see. Thank you so much. So I think that like I see many like successful scientists like you. And one very interesting lesson that we learned today is like we know who we are. We know our strength and weakness, and that's how people like you has been very successful. And I think that is very important lesson for all of it as well. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing, the story today. And you have any chance to go to Florida, to United States, I would love to welcome you to our university, and also to take you around in Florida. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Professor Marcus. Yeah, please, Thomas.
So thank you. Just last week, during the scientific committee of my institute, we discussed the opportunity to have some presentation like that for the students and the young researchers. So that was very interesting, in fact, just timely.
Yeah.
Was expecting more on LiDAR, but then I was surprised, and this was very interesting. And I think about collaboration, that's a very important point, and all this discussion about the soccer, myself, I prefer more the handball. Sweden has a very strong team as well, a women team as well. And, this is very nice. But one thing that you said, you are not talking only about the scientists. You are talking about administrative support technicians, everybody making what an institute and a laboratory can be. And this is very important, that all of us, we always identify that we cannot do anything without a lot of many other people with different education and profile.
Sure.
I mean, if there is no administration in one institute, you can't do anything.
But that's exactly what I meant. Normally, I mean, it's pretty strict that the scientists get all the credit, and I think I mean you benefit from the secretary, from the IT, from everyone that participate, and that's exactly. Maybe I didn't think of that when I was playing football, but I mean, who made the washes of our shirts? Who did cut the grass? Who did make sure that we were transported to the right arena? All of this. I mean, it's not about just making the goals. It's the whole package, and
Exactly.
Everyone should feel that they are part of the same team, and not just that someone is doing for you. I mean, we're doing it for us.
Exactly, and this is something that sometimes is a bit not well understood by the youngest.
No.
That's in particular with the evolution for us, with the way of getting financial support. Most of them think that they have to be in front, they have to be the PI, but sometimes they forget that lots of people are around to push this person.
Yeah, right.
Push this one.
Right.
So this was a very good message. And then there was another one which I was particularly interested in, is because I love working at interfaces with astrophysics, artificial photosynthesis, and now more and more combustion as well. But I will never become a laser spectroscopist, combustion, or an astrophysicist, because this is too much about literature and everything and all the knowledge. And this is something very important, to always be sure that you're developing your own field of knowledge, and try to transpose that with a colleague by learning the language they speak, to try to exchange ideas. All these ideas. And it's always very important to keep in mind that if you stop developing and do bad astrophysics or what else, it will not bring you to something good after a few years or many years. You always have to keep in mind that you have to bring something at the highest level possible from your field. Very important.
I think it's very important to try to be best in something. I mean, exactly. in science, I mean, I have colleagues that are probably the most sort of has the widespread knowledge, a little bit on CFD, a little bit on kinetics, a little bit of diagnostics, but that person might never sort of be chosen, because there are always people that are more advanced, and that's what I have had discussions with colleagues here that we will never be able to do the kinetics. We will, I mean, speaking for the lazy people, will do the CFD. So then it transports the challenge to create ways to collaborate and get both sort of advantages. And that's where I then saw the challenge. How do we really communicate and make this work? Because I realized very much in the mid 80s that a mechanical engineer and a physicist do not mix spontaneously. It's the language is completely different. The ways of how we are brought up. I remember when I went to physics and we were sort of going to the mechanical engineering building and spoke about greasy building and I mean it was sort of a developing what you call it atmosphere where the physicists were the best, and of course from the mechanical engineering they saw the same on us, and that is hard to break.
Yes, and sometimes that's when you start to analyze things from another field, you may have good ideas, but in general, you don't know all the dynamics of all the questions from mechanics or chemistry or what.
No.
Very important to collaborate because one can be completely wrong. In fact, it's what has to be done and the good directions and so on and all. And when you don't know, that's much easier to find new trajectories, but you're always 100% sure that it will be wrong because you just don't know most of the things. So that's very important to collaborate.
But I mean, there is I would mention a slight problem because we have worked, as I mentioned, and worked together with the mechanical engineer and for a PhD. And then our PhD has been sort of in charge of the diagnostics and worked together with people doing the DNS or large LES or whatever. And in the grading committee, sometimes the opponent or the grading committee have said that they were a little bit weak on the fluid mechanics. And then you have to argue that this is not part of the PhD to sort of understand all details of the CFD or kinetics. I mean, we are in charge of the diagnostics, but it's not without problem to sort of present a thesis where you have expertise from different areas, and of course you should be aware of the main sort of things that are in the paper. But I mean, to going into detail of the CFD, that might not be part of that person's PhD, and that you have to tell the grading committee that was not part of the PhD. And we have in Sweden, I don't know how it is in other countries, where we sort of you write what you have done as a PhD in each paper, trying to describe that I've been in charge of the diagnostics, I've been doing that, and then for the CFD or the other things that was done by other colleagues.
Yes, well, in France, the way of writing the PhD is slightly different.
Okay.
But in fact, we always have to know what the student really participate or has done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it should not. Most of the work should not be in the thesis.
No. Yeah.
So that's the point. It's really what the student has done.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Marcus. And you have any other question for the speaker, or you want to discuss something? Please go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to have a question, please.
Yes, please, Wang.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the very interesting lecture. So I'm working in Vietnam now. So I would like to add one question regarding with some issue you raising in the lecture. So you said that sometimes head index also a citation very important for the researcher, but sometimes you can see that the people working with a very specific topic, it's very difficult to increase the head index or the citation in comparison with another people. They also have the same background, but they working with multiple topic at the same time, or they have working for example, like multidiscipline area, for example, like the people working in mathematics, very difficult to increase the head index or citation. But when the people, they were also using the same background in mathematics, but they apply for telecom commission, very easy to increase the head index or citation. But how you come up with the conclusion or the experiences like this? So could you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I could certainly comment on that. I mean, it's absolutely true that different areas have different ways to increase the citation. For example, if you work in nuclear physics, I mean, you get a lot of authors, you get a lot of citations, and I also know that some areas you are not like in mathematics. I mean, it's not at all the same, but in the group I'm referring to, we have experts that explain, because I don't know the area of sort of robotics or whatever mathematics, but then we have an expert from mathematics that explain for us that in this area it's not uncommon to have a H index of 10 or something and still be world leading or something like that. I mean, it's very important that this is taken care of, and also I think we have had I have a colleague that is world leading in combustion engines, and his Web of Science H index is not very high, but his Google Scholar is very high, just for the simple reason that he published in SAE, and SAE is not part of Web of Science. So when he applied for the National Science, he got the comments that you publish too little, and still he's world leading in this area. So that is very important, that in the more engineering, I mean, they might not be part of the Web of Science, and if you go for that kind of H index, you have to be worried a little bit. So that's at least the boards I've been involved in taking care of, because we have people from different areas that advise on this issue.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Wans. Anyone have any question? If no, I will have one question, Marcus.
Yes.
Yeah. You said that we should be honest.
Yes.
In the interview, right? And for some Valambe, they asked that, what is your witness?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I am aware of my witness. And for example, when I talk to you, of course, I am not hiding my witness. I'm really open and tell you that I have some boys still with. But what's about in front of the board? Should I, to be really honest, to talk about that?
Well, I mean, if you would go to this board, which consists of a lot of experienced people, and say that I don't think I have any weakness, I mean, then they won't believe you. I mean, it's seen to be, if you're honest and be able to identify the weakness, that's to be seen as an advantage. Really, to have the capability to judge what you're good at and bad at. And especially, I mean, to identify the weak points, and then to show maybe that because of this weakness, I've done that and that and that. That would sort of give you extra credit.
Yeah.
So I think, as always, I mean, you can't fool people easily. At least not the people that have a lot of experience. So I would always say that try to be honest.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, no, we don't try to hide that or say that we have no witness, because it's impossible. But what is the witness? Should we tell the board? What I mean?
Well, it depends on what weakness you have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have different weaknesses, but I think it's. I used to ask this question because it's sometimes you see that people have not sort of thought of this question. They are sort of cannot come up with anything, and I think it's as I said before, when I made the choice not to go for soccer. I mean, that was based on a judgment, and as honest as possible judgment on my capability. So I think that is extremely important, to be honest to yourself. It's of course important to be honest to others, but also to yourself, to really be able to see what pros and cons you have.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Just on that point, there was another advice very close to this one, was to train yourself with experienced people, and then you will have the answer of what you could say, maybe. How to say it.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Marcus. Yes, Perit, please.
Yeah, I just think about this with admitting some weaknesses. Of course, you should not just say I have this weakness, but if you combine that with some thoughts around this and how you can come around this, that shows that you have thought about it. So so it's more, yeah, you have said it already. So, but I think it should be thought through how you explain that,
Yeah.
and discuss around it. So.
But I mean, when we have had these interviews and you ask this question and you see that the candidate has not even thought of that question, then I get a little bit worried, because I think you should always consider your weakness and pros, so that's why I used to ask that question.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. Actually, I have an interview next week. So I should think about this thing in case other people ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Other question, please? If not, we continue with the second section of the seminar today.
Could we take maybe just 5 minutes so I can get coffee?
Yeah.
Would that be okay, that we sort of 5 minutes from now continue, if you have the strength to listen for an hour, 45 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so then we can just 5 minutes would be enough for the coffee, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Hi, Cương.
Yes. Hi, Hướng. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to go now. So yeah, I'm afraid that I would not be able to attend and listen to his second lecture. But really appreciates what you did, and I think that he's a wonderful scientist. And I'm sure that we would invite him at some point to Vietnam to have more interaction with the Vietnamese student in the future. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye, Hướng.
Bye.
Hướng, actually, okay, he's leaving. Actually, Marcus, he about to visit Vietnam together with his wife. So I think if we can somehow invite him for an invited talks in Vietnamese academies, then I think it will be wonderful.
Yes. So when he planning?
I don't know. Actually, he talked many times about that, but because the pandemic, so it's postponed. But
Okay.
now when the pandemic is over, I think he will. Yeah.
Can you put him in contact with me when he had clear plan to visit Vietnam, so I can arrange for his visit to some university in Vietnam. He can give a lecture, and people over there can hold him as well.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I will do
Yeah,
that.
just his contact to me, and I could invite and arrange for his visits. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Okay, let's see here now. You still see the garden?
Yes.
Okay, so now we switch gears and go into the diagnostics of combustion processes using lasers. Let's see if I have this one. Good. So I'll since we have been discussing quite a bit, some parts I go through a little bit faster, but this is what I thought to cover a little bit of background introduction, a little bit of laser-induced fluorescence, thermographic phosphors for surface temperature measurements, a little bit on Raman, a little bit on further developments, and this is just a portion of what we have been working on at the division. So I've given a course in China for many years, so this is sort of some of the things that I include, and that if you look at the why we are using lasers in combustion, we have certain advantages. You see, we have the laser coming into the flame, and at least to the first approximation, it's non-intrusive. We focus the laser beam to a small spot which define the spatial resolution, and we use pulsed lasers. Traditionally, that has been 10 nanoseconds. Now it's pico and even femtoseconds. The techniques are species specific and multiplex, meaning that we can measure in multi-species and in multi-point, and we can go to more or less any temperature. And the parameters that we are interested in are temperatures, species concentrations, both atoms, radicals, molecules, velocities, characteristics of particles, surfaces, and two-phase. So I used to divide, or we used to divide these techniques into two categories. One is incoherent techniques, mainly based on linear optics, where you have a laser send into the flame or whatever you want to study, image that onto a detector, sometimes through a spectrograph. And here you have the Rayleigh scattering, laser-induced fluorescence, which I will come back to, laser-induced incandescent for measuring soot properties, laser-induced phosphorescence for measuring surface temperatures on surfaces, and Raman scattering for major species. And then some coherent techniques, CARS, polarization spectroscopy, genophora mixing, or stimulated emission, essentially where you have two, sometimes three beams crossing, and from the crossing point a new beam emerges, which carry information about the parameters you want to measure from the crossing point. So if we start with laser-induced fluorescence, it's probably the technique which has been mostly used. You excite a species, molecule or an atom from the ground state to an excited state, and then you have emission, and by analyzing that you can get information about the concentration in the ground state. And here you have a lot of species which you can measure. You can extend this by using two-photon excitation. Then you can look at the small atoms, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, as well as some species, where you excite from the ground state through two photons and get the emission from the excited state. Here you have a high sensitivity mostly, and you can do 2D imaging, which means that you have your laser beam, focus that into a sheet, sent through the flame or whatever environment you're interested in, tune to the resonance of the molecule or species you're interested in, image that onto a two-dimensional detector, and then you can get, in a single shot, the distribution of that species in the combustion environment. And here I will try to lead you through the development phase of this. I mean, here we start up with single species visualization, and here you have a burner producing a turbulent flame, and in combustion many times it's turbulent that is of interest and how that interact with chemistry. And here we as I indicated in the previous lecture, we have developed to use, instead of a dye laser, tunable Alexandrite laser, which is frequency double to the region where CH is absorbing. And thanks to the long and broad pulse, we can extend the detectability to orders of magnitude, roughly, to detect this species, as compared to when you use a conventional YAG dye system. So this is the same picture I showed in the last lecture, when we have a sheet which is up to 80-90 millimeter high, so that you can really get the whole structure. And here you can see the flame front and how that is influenced by the turbulence. And that's exactly what our colleagues in doing the CFD wants to look at. And then you can extend that further, not only to one species, you can look at several species, and in this case, either 3 species or 2 species plus temperature, and then you have several lasers. It's essentially an additional experiment where you put the laser beam on top of each other using dichroic mirrors, and then you have different cameras. And here we have studied laminar flame anchored on the pilot flame, and then you increase the speed of the central jet, thereby increasing the turbulence. And there we can capture several species at the same time using these 3 lasers and these 3 detectors. So here we have CH, formaldehyde, and OH. And here we increase the jet speed and thus the turbulence. So here we have 66 meters per second, 165 meters per second, finally 400 plus meters per second. And here you go into what is called the distributed reaction regime, which is very interesting for the modelers trying to model the behavior at this very high turbulence. So this is belonging to the second category. I mean, we study the flames in the lab, but then we also want to take this in the real world, and this is probably one of the hardest environment we can think of. This is experiments made on the jet engines, normally sitting in the Swedish fighter. And we had a collaboration with Volvo Aero Corporation some years ago when they took this engine for maintenance, and then we were asked to make experiments in this environment. You could just imagine being in the same building. Well, that was not allowed to be close to these jet engines, where you have a lot of vibration, you could have absorption, you could have beam steering, you could have interference from background radiation, everything you could think of. So the aim here was really just to see, would it work at all to visualize the unburnt hydrocarbon, in this case Jet A. So here we have a YAG laser, focus that into a beam that goes through the burner, and then we put a 2-dimensional detector, not in the flame of course, but I mean slightly off angle, so that we didn't burn the detector. So then we want to see the amount of unburned fuel as a function of the afterburner that goes from 0 to 100%. So here you can see that we start with the afterburner at increasing, and you can see in the outer area, you could see the unburnt hydrocarbon goes up to 60% of the full thrust, then it disappears, then it goes back, and when it returns roughly about 60%, you could see the unburnt hydrocarbon. And that is, of course, of interest to be able to measure in these environments. Next, so far I've discussed how to make measurements with 10 Hertz laser. In turbulent combustion, you want to really study high speed. And then you can use a high-speed laser and CMOS cameras where you have a lot of pulses. The pulse energy is not that high. It might be on the order of 10-50 millijoules at 532, and on the order of 0.3 millijoules at the wavelength where OH absorbs. So here we have a special, I don't know why that is not running this.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there is a high-speed camera just looking into the flame. And here we see the OH distribution recorded at, I think it's 22 kilohertz, or well, kilohertz at least. So that then you can see and compare this with modeling. The problem with this or challenge is that these lasers have a pretty low power. It's only 15 millijoules. But pretty recently, there has been commercially available pulse burst system where you can produce many pulses in a burst with an energy up to roughly 600 millijoules per pulse. And that can run up to 100 kilohertz. And here are some examples. Here you can see the formaldehyde in different flames. You have 30 meters per second up to 400 meters per second. And there you can get every 10th microsecond, you will get an image of the formaldehyde. And then you can follow in time in this sheet what happens. And then the next step, as before, is to take this to an engine. And here with the 100 kilohertz, it's formaldehyde visualization in a special engine, homogeneous charge compression ignition engine. So this is not a spark ignited engine where you have a flame front. So this is more auto-igniting all over the place. So this gives an insight within the sheet what's happened at this very high speed. So now we have looked at single species, multiple species, high speed, and then the next step would be would it be possible to combine this? So this is a somewhat messy setup. Very briefly, we have the burst mode laser we produce with a harmonic generator 355. Most of this goes into an optical parameter oscillator producing the wavelength where we can in frequency double to the OH. The rest goes for visualization of formaldehyde. So we have the two beams, 284 for OH, 355 for formaldehyde, going through into the flame. And then you have two high-speed cameras with specific filters. And then we will get both OH in red and formaldehyde in green so that you can visualize two species with a high speed. Next step in the development, if we go back a little bit, if you look at this sheet, you can see that sometimes you see an island coming up, which doesn't look physically, there you could see, right? That and here. And that is, of course, because we are trying to visualize a three-dimensional phenomena with a 2D laser sheet. And then the question is, would it be possible to do 3 or maybe even 4D visualization? And then we have a lot of nice tools. So we have high-speed lasers. In this case, it was a YAG cluster. So now if we send out all these lasers to a very fast scanning mirror, then the first shot goes like this, right? And then very short time afterwards, for the next pulse, the scanning mirror has slightly changed so that the next sheet is displaced maybe a millimeter or so. So within the time scale of the turbulent length scale, we fast or very, very fast sweep the laser through the region of interest. And then we have a high-speed camera that record each single line or sheet. Then we would be able to get 3D. And if we do this also with a high-speed laser, it would in principle be possible to do 4D, 3D temporal resolved. And here is just a demonstration. I'm sorry. You don't see that it works?
Not yet. Yeah.
Let's see whether I can. Now, here is the OH 3D temporal resolved, still as a demonstration. And here you can also see the problem or challenge that we have a huge amount of data to take care of. So, I mean, here I think in order to use this together with the modelers, we have to work with probably mathematicians or how to treat all this data to present this in a good way. So this is sort of a kind of a demonstration that in principle it's possible. So the next, which you are all aware of, Raman spectroscopy, I don't have to go into detail. I just wanted to say that we have challenges, as you know. It's a very weak process. And how do we, can we be able to use this for minor species detection and also to handle the stray light and background and emission from, for example, laser-induced fluorescence. And that's something which we have been working on. And one thing is to enhance the average power. That is to use the high-speed laser. So we have the high-speed laser. We are not at this moment interested in the single shot, but we get a very high average power. And then if we, on the order of 100 watt single pass, and then if we combine this with a multi-pass cell, then we can have up to 50 passes. And then we can increase the detectability even further. So my colleagues here, Christian Brackman and Haisel Kim, have shown that it's possible to go down to some tens of ppm at flame temperature. So in principle, Raman can also be used now for minor species detection. Another problem is the background and stray light. And there we have used what is called spatial periodic shadowing, which means that we create, put a grating in front of the slit and thereby get a certain pattern. And then we use lock-in amplification only on this frequency. And then we can reduce the stray light, as could be seen, up to 80 times. And inspired by that, a major problem in Raman spectroscopy is that you can get fluorescence as a background. And there you can take advantage of the fact that many times fluorescence is unpolarized, whereas Raman is polarized. And here we used temporal lock-ins, which changed the polarization in time and looked at the frequency of that, so we can suppress the background fluorescence. And I would emphasize that both the multipass and the polarization lock-in, this polarization suppression was done many years ago. I think the first multipass was done in the early 70s, and the polarization suppression has also been done, but not in this lock-in fashion. So, but with all this, we tried to measure in this sooty flame, and the raw data could look like this, where you have a lot of background, you can hardly see some features. And then when you use the techniques available, even in this sooty flame with the background, you could dig out the constituents in the flame. And that has also been done in gasification to suppress the background. The next technique is based on thermographic phosphors for surface temperature measurements, and that is, especially from the industry, has been a great need to measure surface temperatures to extend and, if possible, optimize the durability, understand heat transfer phenomena, and to use this in engines, gas turbine furnaces, especially in engines, if you want to measure on moving subjects. And then this technique is you put a lot of small micron-sized particles which host an inorganic material. It's a ceramic and it's doped with an activator. And this is normally used in lamps and field emission displays. So what you do is that you put this phosphor, a very thin layer, onto the material. You illuminate with a preferably UV light, and then you look with a detector. And then you can detect either the spectra or the temporal response. For example, here you have a specific phosphor, and you can see how the spectra changes from 300-400 Kelvin up to above 1000. You can see that the spectra changes quite a bit. And if you remember here, you can see that the ratio between the 455 and the 493 gives you, if you plot that ratio, this will give you sort of the temperature for a certain ratio. And in a similar way, you can look at the temporal decay of the thermographic phosphors. So if you have a low temperature, you get a longer decay, and that you can also, all of this you calibrate, so you know very well how the ratio or the temporal decay behaves for that specific phosphorus that you are using. And there are a lot of phosphors available. Here you can just see some of them. You can look at the lifetime and the ratio as a function of temperature. And then, of course, you want to measure or use phosphor that is as temperature sensitive in the temperature region you want to measure. And you can extend this to do it two-dimensionally. Here we have a device which produces two images. This is on the CCD. You produce two images of the same object, in this case, a candle, beside each other, right? And then if you go back, you remember this. So if you, in these two images, put one filter centered of this wavelength, one filter of that wavelength. So one filter here, one filter there, and then you know exactly that one point in each image correspond to each other. And then you can take the ratio between this point here and that point, go into the calibration curve, and then that will give you a temperature. And then you do that for all pairs in these images. And then you can produce a two-dimensional temperature image. And that was done firstly together with colleagues from fire engineering, and they wanted to see the flame spread from a pool fire. So here we put a small piece of wood into a pool fire, position the phosphorus on the surface, and use the technique I described before. And then we can see how the temperature changes from the time that the flame was ignited up to a couple of minutes. So you can see the surface temperature, which is very important when they want to do the heat transfer modeling of how a fire behaves. Another application is in an engine. If you want to measure, for example, the temperature on valves, how could you possibly do that temporally and spatially resolved with conventional technique? Here you put the phosphorus on the valves. Here you can see the valves, illuminate through the quartz piston, and then detect in the backward direction with the stereoscope that I just showed you. And then it's possible to measure the temperature on the intake and the exhaust valve from the start of the engine. Now you can see that the temperature changes from 10 seconds up to 3 minutes after the engine was started. So this is techniques that have been developed and can now be used very close together with our colleagues from industry. A little bit on further development. I will describe 3 different further development, and one of these is called structured illumination. Normally, as I've described before, the laser is formed into a sheet, and that constitutes sort of when you get the image from laser-induced fluorescence or Rayleigh scattering or whatever. But you can also get the laser into structured illumination, and you can do that in different ways. And then the sheet would look like this. It's a sort of a sinusoidal intensity distribution. That was developed originally for in biochemistry, biology, to increase the contrast and depth of view in microscopy. And here in our division, Edward Berrocal and co-workers developed this further for measuring and avoiding multiple scattering in sprays. So, but what I will describe is something else which we have worked on, and that is multiple imaging, ultra-fast imaging or 3D imaging using what is called frame. And here you have the image if you illuminate that with a sort of conventional laser sheet. That is in the spatial domain, and here you have it in the Fourier domain. So here you see that in the Fourier domain, you get most centered in the around 0. But now if we impose on this sheet the structure, then we will get additional images in the Fourier domain. So if, for example, in this case, we have the structure illuminated by the laser beam coming in this direction, then we'll get these 2 images. Then we have from the other direction, and so on. So we can get a lot of new images in the Fourier domain. And how could we use this? Well, for example, we can use it trying to do 3D imaging. 3D imaging without using this very advanced detectors or lasers. So here we have flame, and then we illuminate this with structured illumination, this direction, this direction, this direction, and this direction. And they're all separated maybe a millimeter or so. And then they are captured with one and single detector. So this is how it looks in the Fourier domain. You can see that here we have the center, and here we have the images imposed from the different directions. And what we are doing here is that we isolate each of these images in the Fourier domain, transfer it back to the origin in the Fourier plane, use an inverse Fourier transform, and then we can get the images. So here are how the camera see all of these images. It's a mess. But then when we go through this process, you can see that we identify the different layers, although they are superimposed on the detector. So it's always a trade-off between the spatial resolution. If we make this too narrow, we'll decrease the spatial resolution, or if it's too large, then we might get a problem with the crosstalk between different images. So this is something which we, and especially the group of Elias Christensen, is working heavily right now on. And here is how you can do the same with high-speed imaging. This is just a demonstration where 4 beams as before is capturing turbulent flame. And here you can see how it looks like from the camera view. You look in the Fourier domain, identify the different images, separate them through the process I described, and then you can get the temporal resolved imaging. So this is sort of a poor man's way to do high-speed imaging and 3D imaging. And so far, what I've described is only 4 images. But Elias and his group have showed that you can extend this up to 1,000 pictures and still be able to see the different images. So this is a field which I think will emerge and be very applicable in different areas. Another application which has been triggered by the needs from industry is to use single-ended measurements. Here is a big furnace. We have an inspection hole here and an inspection hole at the other side, and this might be a furnace on the order of 10 meters. I can remove this again. So the question is, how would it be possible to measure if we only have an inspection hole like this? If we want to measure what is happening in the furnace at a certain location? Well, the first thing, the question is single-ended combustion measurement possible? And then you could think of LiDAR, where you have a laser, you send in the laser beam, you look in the backward direction, and LiDAR has been used quite a bit for many years, and it's a well-known technique for probing atmospheric pollutions, and it works in a simple way that you send out laser beam, and then you look in the backward direction, and you know the speed of light, and then you can say that a certain time or a distance you have a certain amount of species. And then you can do this also two-dimensionally if you have a two-dimensional detector. Normally the LiDAR is done with nanosecond laser. A nanosecond laser means that you have a spatial resolution on the order of 3 meters. That's clearly too long. So what we have tried to do is use a picosecond laser and a streak camera. And once again, as a proof of principle, here you can see that we have a flame positioned 2 meters away. We use Rayleigh thermometry, send in the laser beam. Here's how the LiDAR signal look like. And then you can convert that to temperature. Or further, to use differential optical absorption LiDAR dial, where you have 2 laser beams, one on resonance and one off resonance with the species you're interested in. And here you can see off on resonance, you take the ratio between them, you know this, the cross-section, absorption cross-section, and then you can convert that to, in this case, it was just a jet of acetone at a distance of 1 meter and slightly above. So this is a technique that we worked on, but it has certain limitation. We have a picosecond system, we have a streak camera, it's pretty awkward. It's we cannot simply use laser-induced fluorescence, since the fluorescence lifetime would interfere with the on the streak camera. So that's why we have started to look into Scheinflug LiDAR, which has been developed here in Lund by Mikkel Brydgaard and co-workers for ecological application. And then we have sort of borrowed that or transferred that also to the combustion area. And in this case, you have laser sent out, and then you detect that in the backward direction. And then you put the camera in a certain angle so that you have full focus. You can have a focus all along this distance, and you can have a very short aperture, short timing, so that you will get short exposure and long focal depth. Here you see also that you have a non-linear spatial resolution. You have this still the 1/R2 dependence, but you have the pixel footprint is non-linear, meaning that at the larger distance, each pixel sees a larger volume. So if you compensate for that, the Scheinflug LiDAR curve is more or less independent on the distance. And that has been very successful, and we have made some preliminary work in gas phase and LiDAR experiments. And here, one of the first was to just put 2 flames at a distance of 2.5 or 3.5 meters to look in the backward directions. And here is the termination of the laser. And here, if you look on this in more detail, you can see how the flame is changing slightly. But then you look explicitly on this candle, and then you extinguish, you sort of blow out the candle, and then you can follow in time and space how the particle is changing as a function of time. Since here we used diode laser, CW laser, and then you can also use this for 2D temperature measurements. And in this case, it was 2-line atomic fluorescence, indium, where you probe the fine structure, exciting at 2 different wavelengths. And here you can get the 2D image of the flame. This is in the vertical and in the horizontal direction. So this is a technique that is further developed, and I think could be quite useful, since it doesn't require that much heavy equipment. Then, of course, the ultimate technique to measure would be if we can have backward lasing. Would it be possible to send out a laser beam and then to get a spatially resolved laser beam in the backward direction? Would that be possible? Then the whole entire signal is collected, and you won't have the 1/R2 dependence. This is still very much under development, but we have demonstrated using what is called stimulated emission. We use a 2-photon excitation scheme, in this case for hydrogen atom, and then you will get a population inversion in the excited states, which created a laser beam both in the backward and in the forward direction. We looked into this in the late 80s, early 90s. It wasn't a success because the spatial resolution was not good enough. But now with the femtosecond laser, things have changed. So here we have a laser beam, 205 nanometers, 125 femtosecond, send that in to focus into the burner, and then we get the spatially resolved laser beam in the backward direction that goes to the street camera. So this is a kind of LiDAR where we use that we know the speed of light. So here is the first demonstration that we could actually resolve the reaction zone in the backward direction with a coherent laser. Of course, this is far from yet being applied. So this here we are clearly in the sort of ground level in terms of development, but I think it's interesting that it might be useful tool in the future. Finally, a little bit on detection of new species. We have been working quite a bit, and that has been led by Shusang Li to develop the possibility to measure species normally measured with diode laser in the infrared region. And there we have used Gen4 mixing or polarization spectroscopy. So the question is, how could we get this spatial result distribution when we have that is normally used with tunable diode laser? Well, if we use, for example, polarization spectroscopy, here we have two beams, one pump beam here and one probe beam. And then we, with the pump beam, introduces an optical anisotropy, birefringence and dichroism, which is then measured as a change in the polarization of the probe beam. So that means that we can get spatially resolved measurements of species that so far has been difficult to measure spatially resolved. And here are with high sensitivity, here are some of these species that could be measured: carbon dioxide, CO, water, N2O, different hydrocarbons, HCl, HCN, and HF. And here are just two examples, HCN, where a lot of fundamental work has been done in order to identify the lines. You know, in the infrared, you had a lot of lines from water, from carbon dioxide. So you have to know this spectroscopy. But this has been done on HCN and similarly on HCl, where you can see the lines here in blue, with a lot of other lines from preferably high water and carbon dioxide. And the sensitivity for both of these techniques of these species is on the order of some tenth of ppm. So it's a technique that can be used quite a bit for spatially resolved measurements in harsh environment. Then I said that the techniques that we have used are non-intrusive. Well, that's not always the case. You can use this to your advantage if you use what I would say well-controlled photofragmentation laser-induced fluorescence. And this works like this, that for example, if we want to measure H2O2, we can use a laser beam at 266, totally dissociate this to two OH radicals. Then we can probe the OH radicals to produce the excited state of OH, and then we can detect the emission. So if we do this in a controlled way with the setup shown here, so we have two laser beams, 282 and 266, then we can probe H2O2. This is the first demonstration. We have a bottle with 3 holes, and we can see that the H2O2 comes up and also in an engine. And of course, I mean, you have to be aware of that in this case, you do not photodissociate water. So it's a lot of fundamental activities to understand what's happening when it happens. And that can be studied with picosecond laser, even femtosecond lasers, to see when and where things happen. So by that, what about the future? Well, if we discuss with the colleagues, it's needed to increase the accuracy of 2D single shot temperature imaging. I don't think we are doing good enough yet, and that's mainly caused by the irregularities of the laser beam sheet, the intensity in the sheet, which induce errors. It would be nice to measure 2D velocity measurement without particles at low flow speeds. We want to measure maybe in dense media. For example, if we want to measure inside a burning wood pellet, would that be possible? Increased spatial resolution in a high pressure environment is desired. And generally, the combustion field has to go and will go into new fuels, non-fossil fuels. And there, I haven't had time to go into this, but I mean, biomass is studied quite a bit. Ammonia is studied quite a bit. And we and others have also started to look into metals, to burning alumina, iron, where the metals have the higher energy density than many of the metal fuels, and it doesn't produce any carbon dioxide during the combustion. But it's pretty complicated and heterogeneous reactions, so it requires a lot of research. So if we look at our toolbox, we have a lot of lasers, we have a lot of detectors, we have a lot of techniques, and if we can get this collaboration to work, I think that we can extend these techniques into other areas. We have already touched on gasification, plasmas, material synthesis, environmental monitoring, catalysis, different industrial applications, ecological applications, and of course in medical. I mean, in many cases we can use the available techniques, the available equipment, and many times we even study the same molecule. So we have the toolbox, and providing we can establish the same network with medical doctors, with biologists, as we had in combustion, I think that we can have not only we, I mean, the techniques and the field can have an impact in many areas, just few of them mentioned here. So, conclusion. I'm of course biased to this, but I mean, the laser diagnostics technique are of essential importance to characterize the combustion. And then the three areas to be able to do the fundamental spectroscopic activities, work together with modeling validation expertise, and to face and work together with industry. And as I said before, these techniques are also attractive in many other areas outside combustion. So this was just what I thought to say, and as you might understand, what I presented here is based on what has been done in our group, and together with colleagues from various divisions, fluid dynamics, fluid mechanics, combustion engines, fire and safety, and many others. And then of course we have a lot of financing support. So by that, thanks for your attention. I hope you aren't too worked out listening to all of this. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. A lot of interest in laser diagnostics technique. Yeah. I would like to open the discussion section. So if you have any question, please don't hesitate to go. Yes, let's see, let I check. I can, yes, please, Thomas.
So thank you for this nice talk. I have just a few questions about the photofragmentation.
Yeah, right.
Laser-induced photofragmentation. For the target molecules, I guess you know the quantum yield for fermentation and
Yeah, you have to watch it. I mean, I didn't say that, but there are two techniques. Either, I mean, you create the species in the ground state and then you probe it, or you can excite it in the with one laser in the excited state. But in both of these cases, I mean, a lot of fundamental work has to be done and calibration, taking into account quenching, absorption cross section and photofragmentation and so it's not a straightforward technique, but I see Xiongshang Li is here and he has been working extensively to extend this technique to, for example, measurements of ammonia, potassium hydroxide, potassium chloride, and with the appropriate calibration to get the number densities. But it's not that easy.
Yes. And I guess because it's a collisional regime, there's a lot of quenching.
Yes.
The collision, so there is some range of pressure for these techniques, or
well, I mean, quenching has to be taken into account, and in the work I referred to that Xiongchan worked with, that had to be compensated for the quenching in calibrating this, and that's why they had special burners where they can sort of make very detailed measurements. So it's but I mean, there aren't that many other ways. For example, ammonia, we have been working with ammonia with the 2-photon excitation. It can be used with the GNF4M mixing, other techniques. I'm not quite sure, maybe even cars, but I mean, it's not the sensitivity. The sensitivity with this photofragmentation is really on the ppm level. So Xiongchan and his group showed very nice experiments, for example, in ammonia flames, to measure the slip of ammonia in ammonia flames. And ammonia is very hot in terms of looking into new fuels. It's an awkward fuel. I mean, it has a low efficiency and it smells but I mean, that's what a lot of combustion people or combustion apparatus have to face to look into new areas, new fuels.
Then I had somewhat similar questions about the structure in illumination.
Yeah.
Producing light sheet, or is it 3D structure? Because we've seen 2D images of this. You have shown 2D images.
Yes.
The light structure.
Yeah.
And then after the structure, if it's changing in time, probably there's a relation to the fluorescence lifetime of the species that are targeted, no?
The fluorescence, I mean, this is the same as laser-induced fluorescence. I mean, the aim with this is just to be able to measure at the same time on the same detector. So you have the same problem, I mean, as in or challenges as in normal laser-induced fluorescence. So the idea is here I mean, you can put the images on top of each other. You can get ultra high speed. The first paper that was published was sort of the claim to be the highest speed camera ever, where you can sort of capture the speed of light. I mean, it's really limited only by the light source, because you can in the first demonstration, femtosecond laser was used, but it could in principle be attoseconds. You can really get information with almost arbitrarily high time separation. But of course, I mean, the same problem as with normal laser-induced fluorescence. The challenge, I would say, is that how would this structure behave if you have beam steering? We haven't so far in our small flame seen any main problem, but I mean, if you go into larger scale, I would maybe expect that you will have some beam steering, and how would the structured illumination work at that time? So this is also in the beginning, but so far I think it's exciting area to be able to probe 3D, to be able to probe high speed And also, I didn't show that to probe several species at the same time. I mean, you can put everything on the same detector and just use different areas of the detector, I mean, in the Fourier plane.
Yes. Looks very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas and Marcus. Any other question?
Yeah, may I have what question, please?
Yes, please. One.
Thank you very much for the very good information for the new topic with me. So I have two questions, please. The first question is that how far the detector to the object you can take picture with the best resolution, please. So how far from the detector to the object, for example, combustion?
Which techniques did you think of? I mean, if you use a coherent technique, I mean, you can essentially go as far from the place you want because you have a coherent beam. I mean, you have if you do a cars or generator mixing, I mean, you create a laser beam and then you can lead that 10, 20, 30 meters away.
Okay.
So that's not the problem. The challenge is, of course, if you want to do it spatially resolved and use this LiDAR technique, what will be the spatial resolution? And that is still to be evaluated in a practical situation, a combustion situation. But I mean, our colleague Mikkel Videgaard and his group are using Scheimpflug LiDAR frequently for measurements of mosquitoes. And Kwong, you know more about this. I mean, it works quite nice.
Okay. So thank you. And I have a second question is about how the effects of the humidity maybe induce with the quality of the results. For example, like humidity about 50% or 80% or 50%. When you increase the humidity of the weather when you take picture.
You mean the how the equipment would work if you increase? Well, in Sweden we haven't had the problem with during my time at least with that too high humidity and so I'm not quite sure I could say what's the limit, but I mean if you can measure 3 meters from a afterburner to a jet engine, I think you can probably do quite high humidity, but I haven't done it in the tropics, whether it will be any problem.
Yes, because in my home country, but sometimes humidity is very high, 90% or 95%.
Yeah. I could, if you have very sensitive equipment, it might be some problems, but I just don't have any experience of that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Vance and Marcus. Yeah, Deep, please.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. It's very interesting, and I found something connecting to what I am doing here. So I have several very simple questions to maybe find out my the answer for my problem. If I'm not wrong, in some image you show that with your technique you can measure the absolute value of the temperature. Is true?
Well, that's one of the primary parameters to measure temperature. So that's and I think the probably still the best technique for that is cars. Per-Erik is expert on that, and there I if I remember right, it's on the order of 1% or something that you can measure on a single shot basis. But if you do it 2D, I mean then you run into this problem that you have a laser sheet, right? And if you have, well, when you have intensity fluctuation within the laser sheet, that will influence the sensitivity and accuracy, and that I could see as a problem. And we have tried to make the laser sheet better, but there I would say it's still you have a problem with the laser beam. I think that there is a development of laser beams that could solve this, but I've been asked by modelers if they can measure temperature 2D single shot within a couple of degrees, and I would say that we're not there yet. Point wise, I mean it's good, but 2D we have to work harder.
Okay, so okay. My second question is that okay, you mentioned a little bit about the spatial resolution of the technique.
Yes. Yes.
Can we really? What is the limit of the technique? I mean the resolution of the technique.
Well, we claim that we can measure down to roughly 100 microns. You can focus the laser beam. I would say that the limitation is the width of the laser sheet if you do 2D measurements.
Okay.
And that's where I might see in the future if we want to go to higher pressure when the reaction zone is smaller, that might not be sufficient. So that's why I put that on the list. If we want to go down to some tenths of microns, could we do that in a simple way? I'm not quite sure. But right now we used to claim that we can go to maybe 80, 90 microns, although in most cases it's sort of 100, 150 microns.
But with the technique of structure illumination, you still cannot reduce you cannot improve the resolution?
I'm not quite sure you can increase the spatial resolution. I mean, we have been asked whether if you
that technique, as I know, they use structure illumination to increase the resolution.
Yeah, that for microscopy, for the depth resolution, yeah, I to be honest, I'm not quite sure exactly what the limit is, but that's a question that comes up. What's the spatial resolution, both in ordinary diagnostics and also in the structured illumination in our sense?
Okay.
I don't think that anyone has really challenged that yet. So far, we are very lucky just to see that it works and you can extend the capability to work in the Fourier domain. But as I said, I still think that there are a lot of issues that you have to look into when you go to more practical application with beam steering. What's the optimum filter? I mean, if you make the filter in the Fourier plane too narrow, I mean, your spatial resolution will be decreased, and if you make it too large, then you will have problems with the other images, and that's something which Elias and his group are looking into, and especially, of course, if you have that they have done work with up to 1,000 areas in the Fourier domain, then this comes up as an important issue.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that I am doing something. I think we also need the very special technique to measure the temperature of a very specific point, because we can create some kind of point we call hotspot. So the area where we have a high temperature is really very small. It's like a micrometer. So I look for the method which allow me to identify the hotspot. So we need to have very good spatial resolution. That is why I
the problem generally when you have high temperature gradients is to that you cannot average spectra with low and high temperature and get an average, because it's highly non-linear since you have the Boltzmann distribution.
Yeah. In our case, the temperature can be very stable, but it's localized spatially in a small area. Temperature can be given at 500 degrees for a long time, so we can realize the slow measurement. but we need to have a very good spatial resolution.
Yeah, and what is good resolution?
It should be micrometer or even smaller than that.
Yeah, I know. That's what I think. It's still a problem, and I know a very well-known combustion scientist that claim that you will never be able to measure at high pressure because you don't have the spatial resolution enough.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's true, but I mean it hasn't been really challenged yet. What will be the ultimate spatial resolution?
Okay, that's somehow confirm my thinking that it's quite difficult to have a good method to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe my last question is that when you measure the temperature variation, one thing in optics we know that when you have a variation of temperature, the refractive index of the medium also changes. So that affect the result of the measurement or not?
Which I once more I didn't follow.
The refractive index.
Refractive index.
It varies as a function of temperature.
Well, I mean, with our techniques, I mean, the problem might be that you might have beam steering. But otherwise, if you do laser-induced fluorescence, I don't see that the refractive index would influence as compared to Schlieren or other techniques.
Because when you shine the laser beam through the hotting area, then the laser beam will be totally changed in phase and in the beam shape because of
you will have beam steering for sure. I mean that's something that is or might be a problem, so that you do not maybe really know exactly what you measure. And that was what was worried us when we did the measurement at the jet engine. There you go through a meter of extremely high temperature, and we weren't sure would the laser beam at all go through. It seemed to be the case, and also we had done cars experiments in a 10-meter furnace, and it works, but it's very hard to priori say whether it would work or not, and how much the beam steering would be a problem. When we started to do the cars experiments, I mean that was something that if you have two beams at different colors and you have to cross them, would the beam steering and the refractive index become a problem? And so far, I mean, it has worked surprisingly well, I would say.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Very nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you, Marcus. Any further question? Yes, Thomas, please.
Yes, regarding the flame with metals.
The what method? The
flame with metals, which I don't know anything about. What are the target species for detection?
Well, I didn't.
Person, yeah.
Which technique did you mention?
No, not the technique. The flames with the metals. With metals.
Methods.
Yeah, metals.
For the future. No, not
for the future.
For the future, yes. The metallic flame. Well, flame.
The metallic flame. The metallic flame.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
what are the target molecules for that? Because photophysics will be very different from.
Yeah. No, I mean, so far we haven't done any laser spectroscopic measurements there. I mean, what has been done, and that is headed by Susan Lee, it's holography to see the morphology of the particles. The target that we have looked for is oxides. It could be aluminum oxide, it could be iron oxide, maybe hydroxide, I mean LaOH. I think the modelers, was it AL203, which we don't know whether it has been studied so far. I mean, it's an area where I think we are newcomers. We have done some on iron atoms, but otherwise, I mean, these are, I don't think anyone in the world have sort of looked into these species that might come out. So there we have to do a lot of fundamental work. I think ALO, I know that the group at Princeton have done some laser-induced fluorescence some years ago. The spectroscopy shouldn't be too difficult, but other species, we just have to work hard for the spectroscopy. So that's an area which I think personally is very exciting to try to see whether these metals can be developed as a reliable fuel. And I didn't mention that one of these metals, alumina, it produces also a lot of hydrogen. And that is something which is of high interest, how to produce hydrogen. Because hydrogen, as you know, is not that nice to store. And for companies like Siemens and maybe ships, they don't want to have big tanks of hydrogen. So maybe you could see in the future, maybe that you have small devices which burn alumina, and in addition to the heat produced, you also produce hydrogen. So that's something which I know that there are a lot of companies that are interested in, and here I think it's an area where everyone, all of us are sort of newcomers. It's a lot of scientific aspect which has to be solved, but it's not solved just for fun. It's solved because that might be important for the future, for the industry and generally for our sort of world to get rid of hydrocarbon fuels and for example the ship engines. I mean, how could you possibly think of using batteries on the ship? And there, I mean, they're looking into ammonia, which is a very bad fuel. And maybe their metal could be something which could be of great interest. And for us being in the field of combustion, having all these tools, I mean, that's why I sort of triggered on this, where I think that you can combine doing something which is very important for the society, but at the same time, produce a lot of very nice, high quality publications.
Mm-hmm.
So that's personally, I sort of think that's a very interesting field.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Marcus. Any other question? No? Yeah. And today is Marcus' birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Marcus.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Happy birthday.
I got a very nice flowers from Kwong.
Good idea.
Yes, this I'm sure. Thursday as well.
Okay, thanks for your attention. I mean, as I said, I was a little bit nervous for the first, well, not nervous, but I mean, I didn't know the expectation because I thought when I discussed with you, Kwong, that maybe there would be more young students than PhDs and not so many professors and senior and then I come with advice for PhDs and so don't feel offended that you got the same advice as the students.
No, I think it's very valuable for us because all of us are supervisor and many, I see here many PhD students too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think Thomas have a lot of have learned a lot of experience from Marcus. Thomas is now director of the One Institute in CNRS in France.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marcus, and all you attending the seminar today. So the seminar will be it's recording, and then I will upload because with Marcus first, and then upload on the website so you can rewatch it later if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you a lot.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye
Yeah.
bye. Take care.
Bye.
Ơi, Cương có mấy giây nói chuyện không?
Dạ có.
Chắc
Hey,
là
mọi người nha, mọi người nói chuyện nha. Ok, bye. Yeah.
Xin
bye
chào.
mọi người nha.
Dạ. Bye.
Nhưng mà chắc là ở cái master ấy,
Dạ.
tại vì là ngày 27 này bọn anh họp tiếp cái này là tức là một cái đề tài master